So thank you for being here in this afternoon. It's still not raining, which is very good. And grazie di essere qui. So the next talk is a very brief conversation with Mike Winkelmann, or also known as Beeple. But before that, I'd like to just ask Ryan Zurer, who kindly loaned the work, to say a word. So go ahead. For a number of reasons, which will emerge.
Thank you so much, Caroline. We wanted to really thank Signora Lavazza and the entire board of Castello de Rivoli for making this beautiful, breathtaking place available to the world for the enjoyment of art. You know, home to so many old masters and contemporary leaders over the years. And we really wanted to thank you for having the vision and the inspiration to put Carolyn at the helm of these hallowed grounds. You know, it takes a great team with an amazing maternal energy to turn a house into a home, and we can really feel that power and that energy that you put into this place, and we're incredibly grateful to start Human One's journey here on these hallowed grounds. And we just would make two quick points of an observation that we've made along our way. You know, as we've looked at art and taken a look at, you know, I'm relatively new to art, so we take a look at the entire history, and we've aggregated a whole bunch of data over the history of art. But data doesn't tell an entire story. So we try to combine the anecdotal stories that we see of the emergence of masters over the history of art and art canon over the years. And two interesting observations popped up over and over again that we saw. The first is that often a great artist didn't emerge as you know, a childhood savant, that it was really the work of a humble practitioner who just fell in love with their process and fell in love with the act of creation for the sake of creation itself, and repeated that over and over and over again until they created something new that was accepted and celebrated by the world. And then the second really interesting thing that we saw over and over again is that often great masters leaned into the technology available to them at the time. Either they sought to push the boundaries by creating new technology, or they combined the tools and the techniques that were available to them at that time in order to create something new. And we see this story play out over and over again throughout the history of art. And so it's with those two observations that you know, we get a glimpse that we may be seeing the emergence of one of art canon's great masters come up. You know, 15 years ago, almost to the day, Mike started making his now famous everydays. Each day, you know, rain or sun, no matter what was going on in his life, he sought out to extend his practice and continue his work. Not for fame or fortune, but just for the sole act of creation. The enjoyment of creation for the sake of itself is the highest reward in this pursuit. And the other thing that we see is someone who is very passionate about extending the realm of digital art and pushing himself forward. You know, next week, as we're all resting after a very big week here in Italy, Mike will be at a digital tools and film tools conference. You know, we see this very obvious energy that he continues to extend in learning new tools, combining new techniques, and pushing all of digital art forward. And through this all, you know, through the fame and the success, he remains the same humble, gregarious, inviting person that he's always been. A family man and father before famous artist, and just a wonderful human being to be around. I am incredibly grateful and very proud to call my friend and now my partner in sharing Human One with the world and helping tell this story of mankind's first steps into the metaverse. So ladies and gentlemen, the master, Beeple Winkelmann.
Okay, this fucking guy.
Okay.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
You don't need that. You know.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You
Okay.
don't need that. Thank you very much. So why don't we jump straight into a question, which is, what is the relationship between the collector and the artist in the digital world?
Well, I think for most works, it's the same sort of relationship that you've seen over many years. But I think this work in particular has the possibility to sort of change that. And I think you will see that relationship change over time, because I think you're going to see more and more sort of dynamic works that change, and they
That's
change
not the
on.
answer to the question.
Okay, sorry. Then
Let's
why don't
try
you answer
again.
the question?
Well, why don't I reformulate the question?
Okay.
So first of all, why don't
Wow.
I reformulate
So how often
the
do you tell
question?
people their answers are wrong?
Okay.
That's just straight up wrong.
So let's start all over.
Okay, let's start all over.
Okay. How and what are we going to talk about? So first of all, Mike and I talk a lot. As you know, as most of you know, we have a kind of every month where we talk for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then Giulia Coletti cuts the stuff that we don't want the rest of the world to know. And we've been publishing these every month for now almost a year. So it's very difficult to actually ask you something that I've not asked you before, which makes this more of a Q&A situation.
This is going
almost.
well. I think it's
That's
going well.
Okay, so what most of these people would like to know, I think, is why in the world would you accept, since you belong to this other world, let's say the world of digital art, which has their own relations with spaces of sale and acquisition, and their own collectors, like great collectors like Ryan and others. It's sort of another planet in a way. Why did you want, or did you accept, to be invited and to be exhibiting in a museum of what you call traditional art? I never used the word traditional art. For me, art that I deal with, normally performance, installation, painting, it can be very traditional or very radical and innovative, it depends. So given what Ryan just said about the relationship with the new technology and a new kind of art, why would you want to be exhibiting together with the so-called traditional art world?
Well, because I think there's going to be a mix of those two. And I think over time, pretty quickly, to be honest, I thought it was going to take longer, but it's gone faster than I thought, that you will just see this as another medium, no different than sculpture or painting or photography. And I think this process of something becoming that was not considered an art form, and the people who were doing it, the practitioners of it, considered themselves artists. Again, I'm not going to overstate my art history knowledge here, but it seems very analogous to photography, which was not art until it was art. And I think digital art has sort of existed for a while, and
What does digital art mean?
That's a good question. I think to me it means something that was made almost entirely on a computer.
Okay, so is Ed Atkins a digital artist?
I don't know who that is.
Okay, well, Ed is in the Villa Ceruti, so we should go see that together.
We should.
Okay, so art made at a computer. So therefore, you have to have a computer in order to make it. Can't be like media art, which is, say, Namjoon Paik, or earlier works that are media-based.
I don't think it's quite the same, because I think the tools are so radically different that it doesn't feel like it comes from the same visual language and the same sort of lineage, to be honest, to me at least.
What does it mean to make something only at a computer?
What do you mean?
What is
What
a
is
computer?
It made? Well, I don't know. What is a computer?
Yes.
Okay.
From your experience.
Sure.
I don't mean
To
like
me, a computer is a
dictionary.
tool.
Okay.
It is a tool that can be used in a lot of different ways. And I think one of the ways that it can be used is to make art. And I think people will come to recognize that it just because it was made on a computer, the image itself, the craft, the intent, the message, that is just the same as any other sort of like medium.
Okay, so it does not intrinsically relate to, for example, NFTs.
So NFTs is a
made-
very new thing that has just sort of like happened in the last roughly year and is a sort of like vehicle to collect digital art. But I was creating this very, very long before, 20 years
ago.
before NFTs. And so the whole NFT thing is really kind of quite sort of new. And I think there are ways to use NFTs as more of a sort of like canvas and more as sort of a medium. But I think it can also be just used as
A certificate.
a certificate of sort of like ownership. And that's honestly in most of the works that I've done, that's just how it's used. The work is the image that I made, the ideas in that image, the color, the form, the composition, the blah, blah, blah. The NFT is just a way to be like, I own this. Just a way to provide scarcity to
Okay.
that digital art.
Okay, so, but some artists will use the smart contract of the NFT as a medium. And they
Yes.
are, let's say, the heirs of the conceptual arts.
And that's where I
Right.
think Human One is something that does kind of use the NFT as kind of a medium because it does change. It is something that will
Okay.
continue to evolve over the course
So
of my
in the
life.
3,000 lines of the smart contract, or that you showed me how I could find and read,
Sure.
because Mike shows me things, how you do find things, and really basics like ABC. Anyway, when I saw the 3,000 lines of that contract, somewhere in there it says, Mr. Collector, you're not actually buying these images nor the videos, but you're buying an artwork that is a frame within which I will change the images for my whole life. No?
Not really.
Okay. Then can you explain what is the really?
I think it doesn't really say that in the code.
Okay.
It's more, I mean, no, it does not say that in the code anywhere.
Okay, so where is this possibility of changing the images? Where can I find that?
Where can you find that written down?
Yes, as an instruction.
It's not really written down. Should I have written that down? I feel like I should have written that
Maybe I
down
should
now.
write that down. So if
No,
you-
I do. I think you do have a good point, and that's something that, again, I'm so new to this world and so new to the idea of collectors and sort of physical works and what defines the work and blah, 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 all those things. You're right. I probably should have written that down. I will actually go back and write that down and sort of like
But how
define
can
it
you
a
write
bit
it
more.
down now? You can change it after
know.
it's sold?
Sure.
Whoa. Okay, so here there's, okay, now I don't quite understand the relationship between giving away everything, which is at the basis of digital culture, sharing, and you've done so many things that you've, for a job, and then you've given away the use of it. Okay, throughout 20 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, there's this, and on the other hand, there's the scarcity and concept of rarity and scarcity. Those seem to be two opposite impulses.
Yes.
So, that's all? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are definitely different, sort of like, it's, and that's what I think is very hard with NFTs in particular, is because we've had, 20, 30 years of, there is no concept of scarcity with digital
Right.
files. A file is a copy
Yes.
of a copy of blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So this
compared
is
to
a new...
painting, say, by
compared to
Bracha
something
or
that you can
Julie.
prove there's just one of. And so it is a different concept, but I think the concept of sort of ownership over something that does not exist, something virtual, that could also be tied to something physical, I think at its core, it's so simple and basic and can be applied to so many different things that it's very hard for me to imagine this going away. I really think it's going to be like email, and it's just going to be like everybody has NFTs, and maybe some of them are art, but most of them are just boring shit like
Buying a
your
cell
car or whatever, yeah. And so I think it's really we're very much at the beginning of what this sort of like blockchain technology and sort of this sort of like scarcity could be kind of like used for.
Now, is there a contradiction between the politics of your work and, for example, the ecological footprint of blockchain technology and video or digital art? The ecological question, because your work is quite politically kind of generally critical of terrible things in the world.
Sure.
And yet you're heating up the whole planet. So how are we going to fix this?
Well, I think it is going to get fixed, and I think I would say to a degree you are sort of like right, but it is a bit more nuanced than people understand, and I think it's one of these things where, for one, unfortunately the sort of impact of this has been massively overstated through sort of like misinformation. It isn't great though, and it could be much better. And I do honestly believe it will get much better actually very, very quickly. And so I think it's tough. And I think because it's so new and because it is something that I think will be around a long time and does have all these uses, nobody really benefits from it being ecologically sort of, or like power intensive, energy intensive. So it's something that I really truly believe is going to be fixed in the next year or two. Wow. And there are other blockchains that are, you know, proof of stake or whatever, where this is not an issue. And so it's not like they don't have any possible way to fix this. Other blockchains have already fixed this besides Ethereum. And so it's really just when Ethereum fixes this. So there's a way to do NFTs that are completely ecologically like
nothing. But even
nothing.
a projector costs electricity.
It does.
Yes.
But
so
all of these
painting,
things
no.
cost electricity. If
No,
I make
not
a big you make a
painting.
big bronze statue, of course it does. You make the materials that it used, shipping it
but-
all over the world, that takes it. You make a big bronze statue,
Not-
that takes
but it's
energy.
not- but a painting, I mean, when you show it, it doesn't take electricity. I
No,
don't
but
have
it
to
takes
plug it in.
electricity to make it.
Yes, that's true. A certain amount
Takes
of electricity. Okay, images,
ship it around.
because we only have like really, there's like speed conversations here. So what about the imagery? The imagery, the imaginary system that you make these drawings every night. You showed me how you make them, and so you have all these characters that you've bought, and you build a certain geometric thing, and then the images that come out are very heterogeneous. They have different styles. Some are more abstract, some are more figurative, some are more games, some are more cinema, some are more news. This diversity of style makes it look like it's made by many, many different people. How is it that you like to, is it you just get bored after a little bit?
I just get very bored because it's like I'm doing it every single day. And so it's sort of like, even to me, it feels like it's the same shit where it's just like, oh my God, this is me doing the same fucking thing again. This isn't original at all. Like, it honestly feels like that most nights because it is every single day. And so I do sort of get bored very quickly of like, you know, the same sort of like styles. And I think the other thing that makes it sort of change over time is the tools themselves are progressing, and they're getting more and more powerful and more expressive, and they allow you know, you, me, whoever, to make images that just either would be very, very hard and time intensive, you know, in the past, or almost impossible to sort of like make in the past. And so that, I think, is another thing that people will sort of like come to recognize as being a different sort of like aspect of digital art, is because these tools are sort of continuing to progress, unlike other mediums. Like if you're sort of maybe like a classic painter, I'm not sure in the last, say, 100 years how much the tools have sort of like changed in terms of brushes and canvases. Maybe they have, but I don't think they've changed that much. But the computer, and that's where I think these things like really sort of like will continue to like open up new possibilities. And I do think it does open up new possibilities with painting too, but like it's really sort of very evident with pure digital art.
Okay, and is your work a form of social sculpture, do you think, in the sense that are the comments, the 2 million people who see every day, Who are they for you? Is it part of the work or is it not part of the work?
It's not really part of the work. I think it's not
So
part of
then-
the work until it becomes part of the work. There's times where, and that's another thing that I think is interesting about sort of disseminating work on social media, is you're able to sort of have this immediate dialogue with the audience. And sometimes that dialogue sort of will affect the next work, but most of the time it's just, they're not really sort of part of my like thought process of like what I'm making. Because especially because I have to at the end of the day sit down myself and make the work. And I think if I'm trying to sort of like please those people or trying to sort of like cater to them, it's just very empty and it's very like, then it just feels like fucking work.
Why?
Then I'm just, they're like this, you know, anonymous blob of a client that I'm trying to like please. And it's sort of like, I don't want to do that. I'm the one who has to sit the fuck down every day and put in this time. So I'm going to spend that time making the image that I want to see.
Do you think that this chaos, let's say, of all everyone knowing everything that's happening all over the world, which this overload of data, big data, has caused you to want to give order to your life by making this every day? I mean, it is in the history of a certain line of work, conceptual work like opalka, counting from 1 to infinity, adding 1% more white to the black background from one painting to the other, or Onkavara making his periodic date paintings, or many other works that have something to do with clocking time. And do you think that in your particular case, it's a kind of reaction, a sort of spiritual exercise? I know you come from a Catholic background. Spiritual exercises were rather important in as ways, or if you think of Benedictine rule in monasteries and so on, you get up at this ora et labora and so forth. At this hour you do this, at this hour you do that. Do you think somehow this giving this, you know what I'm asking?
Yeah. I think to a degree that is a piece of it, because I do take it very, very seriously. And if I were to miss a day, sort of because I did not plan ahead or something happened, I would be very, very angry with myself and very disappointed in myself. But I would not stop. I would keep going, and it would be like I would learn from that, and that would be that.
So it's a kind of performance art then, a sort of a endurance project.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really feel like performance art because it feels like something that I'm doing for myself. And if I missed a day, I could easily just post some shit and nobody would know. But that's not the point. And I think it doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like something that, because I've done this so long, and I don't really know anybody who's done something exactly like this for this long, that I have to keep going with it. But it feels more, that part of it feels like it's for other people. But there's another piece of it that feels very much like it's just for me, if that makes sense.
Any questions?
Which I'm sure it does not.
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
What happens when the medium gets old? I mean, do you fantasize your work, how we receive it in 10 years? Traditional or analog? I have just seen this fantastic Castello Rivoli program, Agnieszka Kranz, living painting. Maybe it can open up this discussion that we are like traditional or digital, because I think it's traditional, but it's also digital.
Yes, I agree. He's saying we're speaking too binary. We're being binary in saying digital and non-digital.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I really do think you're going to continue to see more works that are like Human One, that feel like they live in between both spaces. It feels to me, obviously, clearly very digital, but it also is a physical work that exists in the real world and has presence and sort of like has its own sort of like implications.
Yeah, but I think maybe the question was more about that we should not go back to this binary thinking, you know, the mind in a vat, this enlightenment thinking that there's the world, which is the mind, they used to think because they didn't have the computer, and then there's the body. And so feminism and all our thinking has broken that down. I mean, along with the abolition of slavery and the abolition of a whole bunch of other things, we've also abolished this old-fashioned idea that there's the mind and the body So there's the computer inside some virtual world is a kind of primitive idea, or wrong idea, and then there's this physical world. So do you see the world as divided between inside and outside the computer?
No, I think it's going to be more and more sort of like evident that it is, those two worlds are going to blend, and I think you've already seen it. We went from going to sit down at a computer to having a computer, you know, in our hand every day, and pretty soon we're going to put that computer on our face.
Yeah.
And, well, I'm telling you, it's going to happen. And so it's one of these things where we can sort of, you know, pretend like this is not
telepathy?
happening.
I'm experimenting with telepathy.
Further down the line, I'm sure something like that will be possible. But I
Of
really
course.
think these things are coming, and I think finding ways to sort of express work that feels like it's a mix of the two things is, to me, very interesting. And I think also through that, looking at the ills of technology, which I think, you know, there are certainly many ills of the technology that I think we're now starting to wake up to, and sort of wanting to make sure that this technology, that we believe in it and it's for everybody, and it's, I don't know, just being done in a way that is going to make the future better, because technology by itself does not make the future better.
No.
It just gives us new powers. It's what we do with those new powers that makes the world either better or worse.
Okay, second question, and then we're gonna.
I feel like a lot of the questions have been around the technological or
Right.
tech, and to me that feels like you're talking about tools, like it becomes very rudimentary. Instead of the conversation around human one as a critique of, like, to me it's a very terrifying piece as well as a very captivating kind of hypnotic piece, in that there's this figure that feels imprisoned, or the image
Yes.
and the figure and the imprisonment of all of that, and this continuous kind of searching, walking. So I'm curious for you, like how those two things came about, the turning of the sculpture, the decision to make that, and the decision where this figure, this androgynous-esque figure that kind of is minding this landscape, or just walking through this landscape, somewhat lost, but just in one motion, and how that landscape, like how do you imagine that landscape changing, and is that a collective project, or is that an individual
That's
project?
interesting question.
Yeah, I think it, I view it as sort of like, this is kind of like the first, and it's sort of like imagining the first person who was born in the virtual world. And so this person's entire sort of like consciousness is in a computer. They don't have a physical body, but they are sort of like a person and a mind, and sort of like we would think of like a human. And so they're sort of like continually walking and sort of like continually sort of like exploring. So I don't really look at it necessarily as something that's sort of like they're imprisoned in it, like it's a shell. I look at it as more of like they're almost like this first like astronaut exploring this world. And that's why part of the reason I put a helmet on is because I did not want it to I wanted it to feel like a human, not a sort of anything like that. I didn't want sort of gender or race or anything. I wanted it to be a deeper like core sort of like humanity that this was kind of like, you know, connecting with. And so I look at it more about this sort of like continual exploration instead of something that you have to do, something that you get to do. This person gets to explore these new worlds forever and continue to sort of like see these things.
But you used the word cage the other day, that it was somehow in a cage in any case.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. I don't know. Part of it, I think there is sort of like a duality to it, but I think I more so resonate with it being kind of like a hopeful thing. But again, the environments that this person is walking through could very much sort of like change that over time. And how that person sort of like looks will change over time. And I think to your question of, is this a collaborative work, or is this a, you know, singular sort of like work? Because the work is not done, and because people come up and tell me things. Actually, just a couple minutes ago, Ryan and I were talking about it, And I was sort of like, oh, it'd be cool if there would be like a way of it sort of like showing the museum shows. And he's like, oh, what if we put like, there's like a sticker on the backpack. So it could have like a little Castelli remote sticker on the thing that it's always kind of like walking around with. And so it's like this like record of where it's been and sort of like what the sort of like thing has gone to. So in that sense, it is collaborative because it's like, that was not my idea, but I love that idea and like I will probably do that. And so because the work's not done, I think that to me is really exciting.
This is
I don't know
interesting.
where it's going either. It's not like I have like the next 30 years planned out and like, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Like right now it's showing something from the Ukraine. I didn't plan that, obviously. And so to me, that's what's really exciting about it. Having this new sort of like canvas and platform where I can explore ideas and I don't know where it's going.
Sorry, but the landscape, for what I saw earlier, is always empty. Buildings are always empty. And there are few human figures I saw running away.
Yeah, ghosts.
But you see the future as an empty place, or is like an astronaut on a different planet?
No, I don't think the future will be empty, and I don't think the future will be like terrible. I think the future is going to be very fucking weird, though. I think it's going to be like, I think we look at how the things that are going on now, and I think a lot of people find the world to be very bizarre. I think you look at things like Trump being elected, to me that is a perfect example of something that's just a very bizarre byproduct of this technology we created.
Yes.
Then it's like, okay, wait a second, wait, oh shit. And it's sort of like, I think, and to be honest, I think the NFTs and me are, as well, is an example of that, where you had this technology that nobody saw coming. It combined with this other thing, and then all of a sudden it's like,
There's Beeple.
where the fuck are we? Like, there it is.
What happened?
Yeah, and so I think as technologies progress faster and faster, and they become more and more sort of like outside of our realm of control, and they're like cross-pollinating between technologies, they're going to combine in more and more ways that more and more unusual, weird shit is going to happen. So I really do think that the future is, it's not going to be a utopia, and I don't think it's going to be a dystopia, but I do think it's going to be super fucking weird.
I would like to end on this because we have some more talks. And so, I know, but we're running late. Oh, but just 1 second.
I'm not going anywhere.
One second, and then we're going to go to the next talk. There's a baby who wants to ask a question. But I just wanted to say something that Julie asked a very deep question, and you kind of shoot it. And it made me think, you know, I always see Mike as a kind of empty screen. The world is like projecting on. And in that sense, there is an analogy with, say, the Campbell soup or the Marilyn Monroe, but in terms of another technology of image making, which is a collective social media production of images. I do see it similar. So I think that the action, you know, the question about the form or the image of the
I don't think that
Marilyn.
I don't think they're the same. I think
No, they're not the same.
No, but I don't even think they're comparable, because what Mike is insisting on is a creative practice inside the computer
Yes,
with tools that are made inside the computer.
yes,
And that's what digital art is.
yes,
Artists have been using the computer from the beginning of
Yes.
the creative possibilities of the computer. So
Yes.
it's just taking that to another extreme, or to another place.
not
And-
as a tool though.
But
He's
no,
using it not as a tool.
No, he's making art, he's using the computer as a tool and making art with that tool. And that's what he's saying. That's what he's called digital art. And what you're talking about was the critique of a particular kind of fine art by taking, and I don't think that's Mike's interest, is being critical of like that other work. That's one of the questions I was asking.
Being critical of fine art?
Yeah.
No.
I think so.
No.
That's my point, but Warhol was talking about commodity and what is kind of expressionism, and so there was a critical kind of reaction to something. That's not what's going on.
No, I don't think so. I agree with you, but I think it's not totally. What I see similar is that there is a certain way in which images and texts are being produced collectively.
Yes, that's different.
And in that collective heterogeneity, I see a mirror of that in this. So there's that vacuousness that reminds me of that vacuousness. There was a question here,
I wanted to ask you,
and then we're going to go to the next talk.
one aspect of the human one work that really interests me, and I can relate to this through my own work, is the fact that you are talking about that the work can be changed afterwards, and I find it very interesting. It's something that I'm experimenting with, but I wonder, for example, would you consider possibility of this work continuing to change after you die?
Oh, that's a good question. I ask him all the time.
It's funny how as soon as any of you can tell somebody from, again, the sort of traditional art world or whatever it's called, is so many people, as soon as they met, what's going to happen when you die? That was like the first question of many people.
I ask also.
Which is a good question. I saw, or at first I was thinking it would just be set to sort of like one thing, and I would sort of make that video that it's like, okay, when I die, put it to this. And then I was talking to somebody, and they brought up the Warhol time capsule things, and that he had all these time capsules, and open this one this date, and open blah blah blah. And I realized it would be very interesting, I think, to do that with this piece, and that I could sort of. It could happen under a few different ways. It could happen after 50 years, play this video. After 100 years, play this video. After, if this happens in the world, play this video. So it could be conditional, it could be time-based. But I definitely, want to make it sort of be able to kind of, again, have a sort of like life after I'm sort of, gone.
Gone. Okay. Bene. Thanks so much. Oh.